Hello. This is another video in our series on the unified path. And the unified path is our proposition that a spiritual path requires a number of different elements in order to address the whole of our person, the whole of our being, and all of our possibilities. And to quickly sum up what you may have seen in our earlier videos, the unified path considers 4 different elements: body, mind, heart, and soul. And any path needs to address all of these elements in order to bring all of ourselves into play so that we may open and know using all of our possibilities: body, mind, heart, and soul. And really that reduces to body meaning movement and ritual, mind meaning doctrine and learning, heart meaning devotion or worship, and soul meaning interior work of some kind. So, these are the elements that are required to address all of our beings, and this is a system consistent with all of the great mystical traditions, which have various elements that address all of these parts of ourselves. So let's have a look at ourselves now, because the first question that arises is, what am I doing now? And that leads eventually to the second question is, how could I, should I, might I change things in order to be better, do better, be more efficient, get more of where I want to go? So let's look at these various elements. Number 1 is dealing with the body, which is to say ritual. Now, a ritual is an activity that is done regularly, but in order for it to be useful in the sense of being part of a spiritual path, ritual, like all of the other elements, needs to be done with intention, awareness, and presence. Otherwise, it's simply a distraction. But there are many things that you may already be doing now that can be considered ritual if you bring these other elements to them. For example, any kind of morning ritual you have in terms of making breakfast or something that simple could be a ritual if in that process you have as much presence and mindfulness and intention to make this part of your awareness as anything else you might be doing. So a ritual can be simple or it can be complex, as many of the traditional and spiritual rituals are, but there needs to be a ritual element. There needs to be a ritual element in your life, and there probably already is. If you look and now cast it in this particular perspective, there may be something that you're doing that can be particularly useful that just simply needs to be viewed differently. All right, so much for the body and ritual. Next is the mind. Well, mind is important because mind gives us a clue of where we live and where we're going and what it is that we might be striving for, trying to achieve, or learning. This is very important, and I say that in light of the fact that my own spiritual experience includes a lengthy involvement with a group that was, in the final analysis, too much about the mind. It was too much about learning and history and the great saints and sages of history, as well as metaphysical doctrine and philosophy, and so forth. It was all very interesting and very gratifying in many ways, but it was insufficient because the whole of a spiritual path requires that element, but maybe in a different proportion. And certainly a spiritual path needs to include, as we said before, all of these elements. And in spite of how beautiful and wonderful learning about the great truths is, that in itself is not sufficient. Important, yes, but insufficient in itself. All right, moving on to the heart, or what we call devotion or worship. And that is either a familiar or a foreign idea to you, depending on your current practice. If it is something that currently is part of your life, a worshiping activity, that's very good, because this is an element that you'll want to focus on at some point. If you don't think you have that kind of element in your life, I think you might have another look. There are many things that we do that give us that connection, that point to the perfect, the beautiful, the transcendent, even if it's not specifically an act of worship toward a god or a principle. There are many things that one can do, and there are many parts of life that can be enjoyable and brought about in connection with this kind of devotional or worship activity. And here I think of a very sagely man I knew who was very much devoted to the truth, and part of his life was maintaining his garden, which was beautiful, which he loved, and which he invested a good deal of time in, and it was in many ways not only a devotion to the beautiful, but also a kind of ritual, because it's something he did every day. But it was an expression of the beautiful, and if you ask him about it, he would talk about it in metaphysical terms, about God is beauty, and he loves the beautiful. So something like gardening, or maybe there's another example in your life of something you do and enjoy or love that puts you in connection with that which is more, higher, better, more beautiful. In my own case, one of the things that I discovered is that I always enjoyed driving, that is, driving down a mountain road in the springtime. It was a high moment for me, and I knew I enjoyed it, but I didn't, until much later in my life, learn how to connect that to being an element in my spiritual life, an element of devotion in which I could express and enjoy and imbibe my love of the beautiful and the magic, in this case, of moving through space and time, which was always a real thrill and later became an expression of the joy of being. That's just one element, and that's from my life. Finally, there's the notion of soul, and by soul here we mean interiorizing activities. The ones that easily come to mind are things like meditation, invocation, and inquiry. And for me, in my case, this is the explication of what's called the direct path, which is a way of exploring one's interior so that one might know oneself in depth and finally learn the great truths of being and existence. Because as I often say, quoting the Sufis, he who knows himself knows his Lord. So this is a quick review of the various elements of the spiritual life: body, mind, heart, and soul. The next objective is to look at your own life and try to discern which elements you have and in what proportions. And in order to facilitate that, I have this little chart I'd like to show you, which describes body, mind, heart, and soul, and the various components therein. And it also is an invitation for you to try to assess your own spiritual life in terms of the amount of time and energy you give to these various activities. There's no right and wrong answer here. The question is, what are you doing now? The question of what should you be doing or how should that be changed has to be subordinate to the question of finding out what you are doing now. So have a look at your life and your practice and run through the chart and see how much emphasis is being given to these various elements: ritual, learning, devotion, and interior work, body, mind, heart, and soul, and see how it looks for you. In my own case, it looked very unbalanced because the mind part was about 80% of what I was doing. And although it was interesting and gratifying and beautiful, it still was too much, and I didn't have enough of the other elements, which now, thanks to this perspective, I can focus on and have changed. So it's an open question for you. You have the chart. See where you are and how much of your life, your spiritual life, is being given to these various elements. Then we'll have another little video coming up soon where we talk about how to look at those and how those might be changed. But it starts with a self-assessment and looking at yourself and seeing where these elements are for you. So good luck with that. I hope to see you again soon. And before I leave, let me note that it would be good to have you as part of our community, and you can belong to our community simply by visiting our website so that we can include you in future productions. All right, hope to see you again. Bye for now.